everyone. Welcome back to She Births Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Michelle, and today's guest is Richard. Hi, Richard.
Hey, Brooke. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to the program.
Thank you so much for being a guest. Before we start off talking about your book and about you being a teen addiction counselor, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm originally from Illinois. I relocated to the Houston, Texas area to accept a job with Menninger Clinic in Houston, Texas.
Oh,
Menninger Clinic is a large psychiatric hospital, specializes in treating both adults and teens who are diagnosed with mental health and substance use disorders.
hmm,
And I worked at Menninger for over a decade, treating both teens and adults. And during that time, I had the privilege and the honor to work alongside a great team of psychiatrists and nurses and social workers and rehabilitation specialists to treat teens and adults and to work with their families. And I specialized in working with adults and teens who have a substance use disorder as well as a mental health disorder. So my focus was on helping them with the diagnosis of a substance use disorder. I would do individual counseling. I did group therapy as well as assessments and testing.
nice. What made you want to get into that career field specifically?
Well, I'd worked for about 3 decades in the field of education. And as I transitioned and retired from that field, I began to work at a mental health crisis center.
Oh,
And uh, and I noticed that many of the people who were coming into the crisis center had not only a mental health issue they were struggling with, but also a substance use disorder that they were
mhm,
struggling with. And I went back to the University of Illinois and obtained a degree in substance abuse counseling,
mhm,
and then worked part time at the crisis center after I retired from education until
mhm.
I was offered the job at Menninger Clinic, and then I went back to full time work at Menninger Clinic.
Wow. So as an addiction counselor, what do you do? Like, how do you help teens and adults?
Well, I was responsible, first of all, with doing an assessment to
Mhm,
determine whether or not they met the criteria for a diagnosis of what we call a substance use disorder, and
mhm,
whether the disorder was in the category of being mild, moderate, or severe.
mhm,
So I was responsible for doing the initial addictions assessment. And then I would be responsible also for individual counseling with these individuals that had the diagnosis of a substance use disorder, where I would
mhm,
meet with them individually, and we would work on the issue of their substance use disorder, including their treatment plan and aftercare after they discharge. And then also, I would be responsible for leading some groups on addiction education, relapse prevention,
mhm.
uh, to which was in a group setting, so that we had opportunities to discuss these issues as a group.
Oh, okay. Nice. Nice. That's exactly what I'm trying to get into. I'm trying to get into psychology to help
Uh-huh.
children.
Yeah.
So I'm on the same path. I'm
Great.
in school right now.
Great. Good for you.
But I wanted to talk about a little bit about your book, The Addicted Child. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote the book after I left Menninger Clinic because my experience in working with teenagers and their families
Mhm,
led me to understand and appreciate many of the struggles that parents go through when they find out that their child has a substance use disorder.
mhm,
Many of them are caught off guard. Many of them are surprised at the extent of their child's use of a substance,
mhm,
and these are all very good parents. They're doing the best job that they can. And what I noticed was that many of them missed the warning signs, and
mhm.
they missed the warning signs because nobody told them what to look for.
Yes.
So after I left Menninger, I wanted to write this book. I kept it to a little over 100 pages because parents are busy,
Mhm.
and I wanted it to be a quick read for them, but I wanted to pack it with as much information as I could.
Mhm.
So there's topics in here that help parents understand how important the adolescent brain is, and how drugs work in the adolescent brain. It has information about different street drugs that are out there because, parents know about marijuana and alcohol and maybe some of the street drugs that are out there, but they may not be familiar with a lot of street drugs that kids have access to. So I put information in the book to help them become better informed about what's out there on the street.
Mhm.
I put in there what assessments your child should have. If you think your child is using substances, what tests and assessments should you get done for a diagnosis?
Mhm.
And I put in treatment options. What treatment options are available if you're looking for treatment for your child? What's available, and what are these treatment options?
Mhm.
Then I put warning signs. I have warning signs for a child that might be using alcohol or perhaps smoking marijuana. I have
Mm.
warning signs for a child that might be developing an eating disorder or self-injuring themselves, because sometimes an eating disorder or self-injury might accompany a child who's using substances. And then I put in a list of resources for parents that might want to continue looking at different resources that might be available. And I put this into, like I say, a very compact book. It's
Mhm.
available both in paperback, and it's available in Kindle for people who like to read on a Kindle. It's available on Amazon. And it's available through the book's website, which is excuse me, helptheaddictedchild.com.
Oh, nice, nice. I have a few friends that I am definitely going to send this to so that they
Good.
can read this.
Great. I think it's helpful for anybody who's interested in adolescent substance abuse, certainly any parent, regardless of their age of their child, whether they're
Mhm.
preteen or teenager, and also grandparents and aunts and uncles, because this can be a very scary subject for a lot of people,
Mhm.
particularly parents. And sometimes it's a subject that they want to avoid because they
Yes.
think this can't happen to my child.
Mhm.
But I really believe that knowledge is important. Knowledge is power. So the more these parents know about this topic, the
Mhm.
more they understand these issues and the better informed they are, perhaps the less afraid they'll feel. And maybe they'll feel a little bit more confident that if they have to deal with this issue, they hope they don't, but if
Mhm.
they do have to deal with this issue, they feel better prepared to do so. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yes, amazing. So, did you want to read your favorite part from your book?
Well, there is at the very beginning there is a small passage, and it says pretty much what I tried to say earlier. I have
Mhm.
sat in hundreds of diagnostic conferences when parents heard for the first time that their child has severe anxiety, major depression, or suffers from an emerging personality disorder or schizophrenia. Hearing these diagnoses is heartbreaking because parents usually see the substance abuse while completely unaware of the underlying mental health issues.
Mhm.
Your child may be creative at flying under the radar and discreetly hiding their substance use. The most frequent reaction I heard from parents was, I had no idea this was going on. Or if they suspected their child was using a substance, they were shocked at how extensive it was. Sometimes it was weekly use, often it was daily.
Oh, wow. It's crazy. It's crazy to see, not crazy, but it's like shocking to hear that
Yeah.
kids are going through this, teenagers are going through this. I don't know. I've had friends when we were teens that were going through this, but I just thought it was just teens acting as teens, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's something that the parents often think too.
Yeah.
Well, this is just an adolescent acting out behavior, and it
Yes.
may be that in many cases, but in some cases, unfortunately, it is a symptom of an underlying and often, sadly, undiagnosed
Hmm.
mental health issue. We
Hmm.
focus on the alcohol and drugs, as we should, but all too often we miss the underlying reason why that child is using a substance, and it goes undiagnosed and untreated. The example that I would give you is that many of the teenagers that I worked with who were using marijuana, often many times a week, when I asked them to help me understand why they were using so much marijuana, the number one answer that came back was, "It helps me with my anxiety."
Yep.
So for some of these kids, they're using a substance because it helps them to medicate an
Mhm.
underlying issue that sadly often goes undiagnosed and treated.
That's true. That's wow. That's really true. Even adults, that's why
Yeah,
they smoke marijuana is because of anxiety or
absolutely.
some depression.
Absolutely. And I think at least for adolescents and maybe for many adults as well, that
Mhm.
underlying issue never gets diagnosed and therefore doesn't get treated.
That's true. That's true. So I wanted to speak a little bit about your workbook. How does your workbook work within the main book, like the
Yeah, the,
guide?
the the workbook is a companion to the main book, and I wrote the workbook and I kept it very brief because I wanted there to be a resource for parents. I
Mhm.
wanted to give them something that would help them. So there are exercises in this workbook, very brief, very simple exercises that allow the parent to put out on paper what they've been experiencing, what they have been going through. And there's some exercises in there that will help them, for example, with anxiety,
Mhm.
but it helps them write down, how their child's use of a substance is affecting them. It's just an opportunity for them very briefly to put down on paper how all of this is affecting them. And and I think it's best used in consultation with a counselor, a psychologist, where they can get feedback on the work that they're doing.
That's amazing. So within that workbook, does it also have where the parent can work with their child, like work together with their child or
There is a brief explanation dealing with communication
Mhm,
and exercises that will help parents focus on when they talk to their child, how they can focus on not just hearing their words, but hearing the feelings as well. And
mhm,
because that's a skill every parent can use. When we're talking to each other and when we're talking to our children, we're really good at hearing the words, but
mhm.
we're not so good sometimes at hearing the feelings behind those words. So that's a skill every parent can learn and every parent can practice so that when they're talking to their child, they're not just hearing the words, they're hearing the feelings and reflecting those back to the children to check that what you think you're hearing is what that child's really saying.
Wow, that is amazing. So what advice would you give parents who have, I wouldn't say stubborn kids, but kids who don't think that there's a problem with them, but the signs are showing?
Every child doesn't think there's a problem. So, uh, but I would say as a parent, if you are concerned, then I think that the first thing you need to do is have a discussion with your child. Talk to them about, your concerns. If you're concerned that your child might be drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana, I wouldn't threaten the child, I wouldn't accuse the child, I wouldn't punish the child, but I would try to have a conversation about how you think their use of a substance is affecting you. So keep the focus on you.
Mhm,
Express your fears, express your thoughts, and see
mhm,
if the child will give you some feedback. Now, that's a conversation that's likely to go one of two ways.
mhm,
It's either going to blow up and the child's going to become defensive and argumentative and angry, or
mhm,
it might go the other way and you learn a few things. But regardless of how that discussion goes, if you as a parent are still concerned that your child might be using a substance, then I would move to the next stage and get
mhm.
the professional assessments that you need to either rule in or rule out if there's a diagnosis, and if there is, what the treatment plan should be. So if you're still concerned, you need to get the assessments that I recommend in my book so that you can either rule in or rule out whether or not there's a problem that may need treatment.
That's amazing. That's really great advice. I do have one final question for you.
Okay.
Uh, do you have anything else that you want to share with our listeners before I let you go?
No, I just encourage everyone to not be paranoid about this topic because it can be a very scary topic. Um, don't just assume that this can never happen to your child, that it happens to other children. It can't happen to your child because I can tell you that no child is totally protected. There's protective environments, but no child is totally protected. It doesn't matter where you live, urban, suburban, rural. It doesn't matter what your level of income is. It doesn't matter what church you go to, and it doesn't matter what school you send your child to. All children are vulnerable to being captured by these substances. So don't be paranoid about it, but as a parent, become better informed about it. Learn the warning signs. Learn what you need to do if you suspect your child is using a substance. Be prepared, and hopefully that will help you feel less paranoid and more confident that if you have to deal with this issue, you feel prepared to do so.
Mhm. Amazing, amazing advice. I love it. I want to thank you so much for being a guest today, Richard.
Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate you taking the time to have the conversation with me, and hopefully, people who listen to this conversation will get a lot of information out of it. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for listening to She Blurs podcast. As he stated, as Richard stated, you can go on his website, helptheaddictedchild.com, and you can purchase his books through there. This is the Parent's Guide and the workbook, or you can go to Kindle, or you can get it on paperback at Amazon. And this is what his website looks like. That's the workbook, the book, and you can go on there and purchase the book if you want to. Thank you so much for listening to She Blurs podcast, and see you next time for the next interview. Bye.